no music, no intro, hashtag Saints Twitter podcast. Feeling very honored to get not only a godfather and a legend in regards to fantasy football, but also someone who has distinctly the most recognizable voice besides Ross Tucker on the podcast. Elvin Silva of Establish the Run. I've done podcasts with Evan before. How you doing, man?
I'm doing real well. I'm doing well. And it's good to be back with you. We've done this like pretty much every year. And we're going to do it this year without Nick Underhill. But, you know, we love to see him out there being successful in the business world because he deserves it. And it's also a good opportunity, to talk to Ryan, who I've never talked to, outside of like Twitter or something like that. But I know that he's been a real prominent voice among Saints Twitter. And I always like to get the perspective of the people that are, that really are hardcore fans and what they think about their team for the forthcoming season.
Absolutely. And we glad to have you on, man. I mean, shoot. I mean, you're like the dawn. I know you didn't start Roto World. I know you came in after Greg Rosenthal.
Yeah. Greg Rosenthal. Well, Greg Rosenthal kind of started just before me, maybe a year before me, and I got out of college, and my plan had been to go to law school, and I just decided I did not want to go to another class at 8 a.m. ever again. So I emailed Greg Rosenthal, and he gave me a shot to work at Roto World, and we built it up. It used to be a baseball site when I started, but then we flipped it and kind of turned it into a football site. So that was I spent like 12 years there. It was a great experience.
Man, that's crazy.
So even before talking about like the Saints and football, something I wanted to kind of just ask you from the jump, how has it been being an entrepreneur yourself? You were at Roto World for so long, and you made this, big career move decision to establish the Run, and have your kind of own business. And I'll be honest, like when I first saw it, I was like, man, I hope my boy, like I hope he knows what he's doing, because I was worried about you. But now, like, I see that site's flourishing and you're doing so well. Like, how did that all come about? And you taking a leap like that to stand on your own and not be with NBC and Roto World.
Yeah, I mean, I was working for a corporation for a long time, and making other people rich, for lack of a better term. And and I was kind of bumping my head up against, like hitting the ceiling, and there was really nowhere really for me to go. Like they're not going to put me on TV, then they're not going to give me like a big raise. So with Adam Levitan, who I had previously worked at Roto World, and with a couple of other guys that are friends of ours and that have experience in the entrepreneurship and had started a company and sold it, and started another company and sold it. We kind of got together and decided to take this chance. And yeah, I mean, it's been like the best decision that I ever made so far. And let's hope that there's a football season this year, or else I'm not going to be making any money.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, big props to you. I think we're going to get some type of season. We'll see. It's just, I think it's going to be drastically different than anything we've ever seen before. That said, the Saints bring back, speaking about the Saints, they bring back a team that arguably may be the most talented team on paper in terms of just depth and the talent on the team. I would say probably, and I think Ryan would agree, the most talented team that Sean Payton's ever had assembled up to this point since he's coached the team. Where do you see the Saints in terms of in the NFC and within the NFC South?
That's exactly where I see them. I see them as right there with San Francisco in terms of the most talented team in the league, and I'd probably give the edge there even to the Saints. The Saints do have a difficult schedule, according to Warren Sharp, who combines all the sports book projected win totals for the upcoming season, and instead of just using what was everybody's record last year, he uses sort of like the sports betting market to more accurately gauge strength of schedule. And the Saints have one of the 10 toughest schedules in the league. But that's what happens when you come in first place every year. And I think that within the division, with the exception of Tampa Bay, I think that the division can be really bad. I think that the Falcons management has put them in like a perennial a hamster wheel of mediocrity. And the Panthers look like they could just be, they're going to give up 35 points a game because their defense wasn't good last year. And then it lost Luke Kuechly, and it lost, its top corner, James Bradbury, and it lost Mario Addison, who led them in sacks, Eric Reed, who led them in tackles. And they're going to start like 6 rookies on defense, and they're just going to get torched every week, So I think that's almost 4 gimme wins. Let's call it 3 out of 4. Maybe they lose 1 to Atlanta, but I think they're just so much better than Atlanta. I think we could give them like 3.75 wins out of just those 4 games alone.
You talk about Carolina. I'm so interested in how they're going to turn out, because you got Teddy Bridgewater, you have Joe Brady, the whole little Saints offense connection, and they do have some weapons. C-Mac. We know what C-Mac is. They have DJ. They have a couple of guys that I think can do something. And when you talk about how that bad that defense might be, they're going to have to be in some shootouts. So I'm just wondering, how is Teddy going to look? Because, we saw Teddy for 5 games in the Saints offense. Now, was he limited by, the Saints skill positions at that time? I don't know. Or I really want to know what it's going to look like with Teddy,
I think it's going to be, I kind of want Panthers on my fantasy team this year, because I think that they are going to be able to score some points, and I think that they're going to have to be a lot more aggressive than Teddy Bridgewater was sort of allowed to play last year. I think they wanted to keep him, low average depth of target, throwing the ball in the short areas. That's, Michael Thomas wins all day in the short areas anyways. And last year, I would say that the supporting cast that Teddy Bridgewater played with last year, obviously Michael Thomas, the best receiver in the game, but it was pretty limited. And that's why you saw the Saints go out and be aggressive and sign Emmanuel Sanders. But I think that his supporting cast actually is going to be better, at least in the skill positions. The offensive line is a lot more questionable, obviously. But in the skill positions, I think he's going to be working with a lot more talent than he did really last season.
I see something that one of my favorite things you do during the season is your breakdowns, before the Sunday's games, and just it's super detailed, and it's one of my favorite things that you've been doing for years now. On Twitter, I've seen you kind of talk about teams that you could feel have a bounce back, and I think one of those teams that you've been mentioning is I believe that the Cowboys potentially having a bounce back type of season. Just in general, how do you view the NFC, and who are some teams you think may bounce back, or maybe teams that can regress this upcoming season?
Yeah, I think that the Cowboys, they have a lot of talent on both sides of the ball, really, but really primarily on offense. They're returning 4 of 5 offensive line starters. Now, the guy that they lost up front, Travis Frederick, that's a big, big loss. But they do have Joe Looney, who started 16 games in place of Travis Frederick in 2018. And they drafted a center that a lot of people liked, Tyler Biadasz, I believe, out of Michigan, and he could get a shot in there. But otherwise their offensive personnel really returns almost fully intact in terms of their explosive players, and they're pulling out of that offense 2 guys who weren't as explosive in Jason Witten and Randall Cobb, and boosting the role for Blake Jarwin, who averaged like 15 yards per catch last year. Was top 6 among tight ends in yards per route run. And then they stole CeeDee Lamb at the 17th overall pick, where no one thought that he would last that long.
Stole him.
Absolutely stole him. And, I think he's going to be their slot receiver, replacing Randall Cobb. And Michael Gallup last year was 6th in the NFL in receiving yards per game. And we've seen what Amari Cooper can do. He's coming off of his best season. He's really such a great fit with Dak Prescott, because Dak Prescott is not the best anticipation passer. He kind of needs to see it open to throw it. And Amari Cooper is one of the best man coverage beating receivers in the NFL. So they're a really great fit. I think that their defense is kind of more of a wild card. They brought in Mike Nolan to be their new coordinator. So they've got some transition really at head coach and at defensive coordinator. And it'll be interesting to see how that's something that the Saints have big time, is a lot of continuity in a year where there's going to be fewer. There's not going to be any OTAs. We maybe we'll get a mini camp in, and then we'll see what happens with preseason and training camp. But there's going to be a lot fewer off-season reps. No rookie mini camp, and the Saints are bringing back their defensive coordinator, their offensive orchestrator, their quarterback. They're absolutely making a run for it. I think that a team that could take a step back would be the Packers, who last year finished 13-3, and they won a lot of close games, and their run defense is questionable. Their secondary play is maybe a little bit above average. They lost Brian Bulaga at right tackle, and their number 2 receiver is a guy who went undrafted a couple of years ago, in Alan Lazard, who has played 18 games last season, including the playoffs, and went over 70 yards once all year. So they're kind of limited from a weapon standpoint. Again, kind of got they were fortunate last year to win all those close games, and I think that they could take a step back to be like an 8-8 or 9-7 team.
A team that kind of fascinates me is the Seahawks. It's just kind of strange watching. Well, not strange, but interesting watching them over the years. Beginning with Russell Wilson, they were ground and pound, defense, and Russell Wilson to come in and make a couple plays here, and that'll be enough. Now they're more of an offensive-driven team. They have the skill positions. They have the skill positions. They have the running game is. Okay. I did like the signing of what's his name, Clyde, but I'm just wondering, how dangerous are they really in the NFC? With them being more of an offensive team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you that they've become more of an offensive team. I mean, just the fact that they have Russell Wilson keeps them in every game. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, no quarterback the Saints played last year just had my nerves bad. Like, the Saints had that game pretty much in hand, like, for 3 quarters. But Russell Wilson, man, he drives you crazy because, guys are right on him like it's a sack. And then, no, it's not a sack. It's a 25-yard bomb, beautifully thrown, right into the hands of a receiver.
Oh, yeah, I remember that week. I played I think it was Tyler Lockett and Russell Wilson in daily fantasy that week, and it was looking kind of grim for a while. But boy, they came back in that fourth quarter and made it a game. So it was fun to see your fantasy points go up in that fourth quarter. But yeah, I mean, and DK Metcalf, he wasn't even really one of the stars at that point yet, and he came on really, really strong at the end of the season. He kept getting better as his rookie season progressed. They started out, he's really running routes only on one side of the field. He's running pretty much, 9 routes and post routes. But as the season progressed, they started to use him a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage, fed him some higher percentage targets. And man, he really responded. and it's going to be fun to see his development because he really made strides as his rookie season progressed. And then they added Greg Olson, who should be a solid possession tight end for them. But yeah, I mean they're a fun team to watch, and I agree with you that they've become more offensive oriented over the past few years.
Jumping back to the Saints, what as an outsider who has his eye on the entire NFL, just what is your perception, I guess, overall of the Saints defense, and where they kind of stand?
Yeah, I think that they have, I think that continuity with, of course, retaining Dennis Allen and, retaining so many critical players defensively is really going to go a long way. I mean, they've become really, really good against the run, and their pass rush, I think, has some room for improvement. You want to see Marcus Davenport take another step forward this year. But the depth and the skill of their secondary also helps to make up for anything that they might be lacking in terms of pass rush. But I think that Marcus Davenport stepping forward as a true 1A outside pass rusher is going to be critical for them. What do you guys think about their linebacker core? Because that's undergoing some turnover, and do you think that they can be better than they were last year?
I'll go first, and I'll maybe let Ryan kind of follow. I think it's one of the me and Ryan have this thing regarding the Saints defenses. At key positions, they have a lot of ifs. So defensive line, it could be really good, especially the interior, if Sheldon Rankins can play like he did in 2018 and he's healthy. The linebacking core can be good if Alex Anzalone doesn't get hurt like he's prone to, and Kiko Alonso, if Kiko Alonso can bounce from his torn ACL. I think linebacker is probably not the weakest. It's probably the weakest areas on the defense. Even as great as Demario Davis has been, and he's been absolutely outstanding. There's so many question marks behind him, and I think that them potentially utilizing Zach Bond and relying as a rookie, I think he's going to make or break the linebacker group as a whole. I wasn't the hugest Zach Bond fan watching him as a prospect, but for them to get him where they got him in the third round was good value. I just don't know how that transition for him is going to be when he was primarily playing an edge rusher position in the Wisconsin defense, and now potentially him switching and being an off-ball linebacker.
Yeah, I agree with Adam. It's just like you said. I call it the ifs. Like on paper, yeah, it looks good, but you're banking on a lot of guys to come back. I mean, Anzalone, he has like one healthy season since high school. So, but he was like in 2018, he was fantastic. So you're kind of hoping he'll be there. Then they signed Chicolo from Pittsburgh. I think he actually has a really good shot of making the team. There's like Craig Robinson in there, kind of special teams guys, but guys that'll get on the field. So I think it's a solid group. You could do worse in the NFL, but you're just kind of hoping at least one of those ifs is a good, is a yes and not a no.
Another guy that I think is interesting that had a great season in 2018, I thought might become a star in the league, was David Onyemata. And I felt like he did not show up quite as much this past year. He's a guy he's been a starter for the Saints and a rotational player. But where you guys think that he can get back on that track? Because I really thought that the arrow was pointing up on him in 2018.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. He was one of the guys that I kind of hoped they'd re-sign this season, and he did. You're talking about a guy who pretty much didn't know how to play football when they drafted him, coming out of Canada. And you were right. His trend line was pointing up pretty much every season. I thought he was pretty good last year, but kind of stagnant, especially as far as pass rush. I thought his run defense was pretty critical to the team. But you're 100% correct. I think they're hoping with what they paid him, they're hoping that he is going to be more of a plus pass rush on the defensive line, probably more than Sheldon Rankins, who has shown plenty of pass rush, but with he's been injured 3 out of 4 seasons he's been there, and lower leg injuries on top of that, which just isn't good for a 3-tech. So I think they're hoping they get more out of Onyemata too.
I wouldn't, and it may sound like a hot take, I wouldn't be surprised that if the Saints kind of moved on from Sheldon Rankins, if not this season, then next season. And I just say that just because of, injury history where he was kind of taken in the draft. I think they feel probably internally that Onyemata can do what Rankins does to a degree, at least that he's more consistent in terms of his availability, and they've already paid him. Potentially what Sheldon Rankins may want in terms of an extension or something like that. It's a small hot take, but it's one I could see the Saints wanting to move away from him if he's not able to kind of show up. It's a really important year for him.
Huge year for him.
Makes sense.
I think it would be redundant it would be a misuse of not asking you about kind of fantasy aspects of things. We know what Michael Thomas does. We're obviously for people with fantasy, they're hoping that Alvin Kamara bounces back. I think I took him like 3rd overall last year, 4th overall last year.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of blew up in my face. Who are besides those 2 players? Should people avoid any other Saints offensive players besides Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara?
Well, I think that a mistake that people still make is thinking that the Saints are, that team that is going to necessarily score, over 30 points a game every week and is still going to throw, the heck out of the football. And, that's just kind of the stigma that we've attached to Drew Brees. But their defense has gotten good enough, and their running game, especially behind that offensive line, has gotten good enough to where – they don't need to throw the ball as much as they used to. And you have Taysom Hill, taking red zone snaps away from Drew Brees and sometimes, getting into the end zone himself, and that removes touchdown chances from Drew Brees. So not from a real-life standpoint, because his efficiency was off the charts last year. And, of course, he missed those 5 games, but he was still playing at a pretty high level. But when you combine the fact that he just doesn't throw the ball with the volume that he used to, and he loses touchdown chances to Taysom Hill every now and again, I think that Drew Brees can be a little bit overrated from a fantasy standpoint. I think that Emmanuel Sanders is going to be a better real life than fantasy addition for the Saints. I think he'll be in that 60 catch range, 750 yards, 4 or 5 touchdowns. And that'll be a lot adding to their number 2 receiver role, because they really have not been able to find a guy to give them consistency at that position. But I think that Emmanuel Sanders is not a guy that I'm expecting a big fantasy year out of, but I think he's going to be an excellent role player addition for them. Jared Cook scored 9 touchdowns last year, and that was by far his career high. I think he had 5, or his previous career high was like 5 or 6, and I think that he could come down a little bit. But I like banking on the rapport that I think he developed with Drew Brees, and he's still a guy that I'm willing to take as my fantasy tight end. Alvin Kamara, you brought up at the beginning. I think that there are clear-cut reasons for why his explosiveness just wasn't there last year. First of all, he was kind of due for some touchdown regression, because I think he scored 31 touchdowns or 32 touchdowns in his first 31 games.
Yeah.
He only had 6 last year. So I think that he can bounce back, but clearly that high ankle sprain was just a dagger for him. You saw that happen with a lot of different running backs last year. Saquon Barkley had a high ankle sprain. He wasn't the same. high ankle sprains just can be really, really debilitating for running backs and receivers. So I think that there's like a good explanation. I don't think that Alvin Kamara all of a sudden just, fell off the cliff. I think that there are clear-cut reasons for why he wasn't as explosive last year as he was in his first 2 seasons.
Are there any other rookies as far as a fantasy standpoint that not even just with the Saints, I mean, in the NFL in general, that you think could be pretty good value?
Yeah, the running backs especially. Everybody knows about the wide receivers at this point, but the running backs like Cam Akers going to the Rams after they parted with Todd Gurley, he's going to have a lot of opportunity. The Rams just were not really pleased with Darrell Henderson, who they traded up for in the 2019 draft, and that shows in their 2020 second-round pick of Cam Akers. Jonathan Taylor out of Wisconsin going to Indianapolis behind one of the better offensive lines in the league, I think has a chance to make or to do a lot of damage. DeAndre Swift in Detroit, I think that he's probably going to be part of a committee, but I think that offense can be better than people expect. Actually, through 8 games last season, they were on pace to average 25.5 points per game, which would have ranked 8th in the NFL, and over 390 total yards per game, which would have ranked 4th. And they were throwing the ball deep and really capitalizing on the strengths of Matthew Stafford. And if Matthew Stafford stays healthy, which that's an increasing question mark, he's getting a little older, and he's had back problems in 2 consecutive seasons. So there's definitely some risk there. But I think that offense, if he does stay healthy, DeAndre Swift can kind of flourish in Detroit.
We spend a lot of time talking about like the NFC. What do you feel like? What are your thoughts in terms of the AFC? I think the most consensus is the Chiefs and the Ravens are kind of the top of the AFC. Maybe so overall, like, how do you view that the conference?
I think that it's significantly weaker than the NFC, and that has kind of been the case for a few years now. And now you pull Tom Brady out of there, and I think that clearly like the balance of power in terms of conferences has shifted toward the NFC. But yeah, I mean, I think the Chiefs and the Ravens stand up top. I think that the Colts are dangerous this year. They acquired DeForest Buckner defensively, and I think that Phillip Rivers is going to be an upgrade on Jacoby Brissett. They're getting back T.Y. Hilton. I really like that pick of Michael Pittman. They're returning all 5 offensive line starters. So I like the Colts as a sort of dangerous team. And I still think the Titans can be solid. They drew one of the second easiest schedule in Warren Sharp's schedule projections. And that really bodes well for Derrick Henry because that suggests that they're going to be in a lot of positive game scripts. And Derrick Henry in his career, when he is leading, when his team is leading, this dude averages 6 yards per carry when his team is leading. Yeah, which is just insane. He's at 4.6 yards per carry when his team is playing from behind. But, I think that the Titans and the Colts, that AFC South division is pretty interesting with the exception of the Jaguars, who I think might be tanking.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of the Jags, I mean, I love the Jags. I love the Jaguars fans. I'm always rooting for them. I mean, is there anything positive?
Oh, they might get Trevor Lawrence next year.
Yeah.
Like, does DJ Chark count? Like, that's all I got. That's all I got.
That's about it. I mean, Leonard Fournette. You guys are you guys LSU fans?
I mean, I'm not an LSU fan, but if they win, it's like okay, cool. But I'm not a fan. I don't care if they win or lose much. But I mean, I've followed Leonard Fournette since he was like a freshman in high school, like just destroying everybody. Like, I mean, everybody talked about this kid. So it's just kind of, I guess, a little disappointing to see him in his pro career. Just kind of, I wouldn't call him just a guy, but you would like to see more. But I think if it was like 1998, I think he'd be just fine.
Oh yeah, he was definitely 10 years. If throw back to 10 years, he probably would be like leading the NFL in rushing.
Yeah, exactly.
So one team that I kind of have my eye on this upcoming season is the Cardinals. I know they, their secondary is kind of but just offensively, Kyler Murray. You bring in Nuke. You have King Cliff, as I call him, leading the charge as a head coach, and they brought back Kenyon Drake. Am I being kind of too foolish or too high on them just being like a very risky team for the upcoming season?
No, I don't think so. I think they had a really good offseason, a really good draft. I think they had a promising first year under Kingsbury, acquiring DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, they're going to pull out Damiere Byrd or Keyshawn Johnson and plug in DeAndre Hopkins for those guys. I mean, they were running out some guys that would be like second or third string in the preseason, and at that outside receiver position, I think that it's going to be DeAndre Hopkins and Andy Isabella as their outside receivers. And then, they play a lot of four receiver sets. They played four receiver sets on 33% of their snaps last year. And then in the slot in those four receiver sets, I think it's going to be Fitzgerald and Kirk. And Kenyon Drake was really dynamic for them after they acquired him midway through last season. He scored 8 touchdowns. Had a bunch of catches, really good in the receiving game. I like their number 2 back as well, Chase Edmonds. And I think that, the trend for, these rookie quarterbacks that get drafted in the first round is that they take big steps forward in their second season. We saw it with Jared Goff. Even Mitchell Trubisky was a lot better in his second season than he was in his first season. And I think that trend is going to continue with Kyler Murray. And certainly in large part because of the acquisition of DeAndre Hopkins. And defensively, I mean, they can get after the pass rusher a little bit. They've got they can get after the passer with Chandler Jones up front. And then they acquired Isaiah Simmons. Last year they got just killed by tight ends. And they were the worst team in the league at covering tight ends. And I think that Isaiah Simmons might be the perfect antidote for that.
Well, my last question for you, Evan, so you can get out of here. As far as back to the Saints with Drew Brees, do you think this is the end for him? I mean, we do. I know I do. But with the production you saw from him last year, the deep ball kind of fading away, do you think this is kind of the last stands, the last chance, the last dance for Drew Brees?
Yeah, I'm kind of trending that way. They did sign Taysom Hill to the 2-year deal. They've started to explore younger quarterbacks with that trade up into the 7th round for was Tommy Stevens, right?
Stevens,
yeah. I don't know where he's going to end up playing. I mean, there have been some speculation that he might move to tight end or something like that. But Sean Payton has talked openly about how he wants to. Sort of groom a younger quarterback. I don't know if Taysom Hill is going to be that guy after Drew Brees, but I do think that this is probably the last dance for Drew Brees. But their team is built for it. I mean, you saw the way that they approached their draft. They were willing to trade future picks in order to acquire, just a small group of players that they thought could be impact near-term players. In Cesar Ruiz and Zach Bond, who you mentioned earlier, Adam. And I think that just the way that their offseason has gone, this is, they're going for it. And even the Jameis Winston signing, I think, if Drew Brees goes down, then Jameis Winston gives them another option that they're very familiar with, having played against him, 10, 12 games inside the division over the past few seasons. And, I think that they're gearing up for this to be, a truly all-in year.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think as a Saints fan, I have this feeling that with all the talent on the team, it's just the the potential disappointment that can come when a team is this talented, it's high. But hopefully the playoff failures, those trends don't continue. But before we get out of here, I want you to plug Establish the Run. Let the people know how they can win shit tons of money by subscribing to your site. I see you retweeting people who use your guys' advice for daily fantasy, and they're just making bank. So let hashtag Saints Twitter know how they can win some money if football is held this upcoming season.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that the thirst is going to be strong this year because we've had a spring and summer without sports. So if you are serious about trying to win some money, whether it be in a higher stakes season-long league or daily fantasy, come check us out. EstablishTheRun.com, at EstablishTheRun on Twitter, and you can find me at Evan Silva on Twitter.
Evan, thank you so much for coming on, man. It's always a pleasure getting to talk to you. Chop Up Football, we greatly appreciate it. I'm going to hit up Greg later and text him and said I had the Godfather Roll to Roll come on the podcast just to throw him some shade. Follow Evan on Twitter at Evan Silva. His write-ups for NFL games before Sunday are still legendary. They're so educated. And, Evan's one of the good dudes where he doesn't have a team. He doesn't have a team. Everything you're getting from him is unbiased, just observation. And so it's some of the best content you'll read on Twitter and regarding football. Thank you so much for coming on, man. We greatly appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, guys. This was great.
Thanks, Evan. Appreciate it, man.
So you can also follow Ryan on Twitter at ThatBoyWolf. We're just going to keep doing our thing. Another episode of hashtag Saints Twitter podcast. With that, everyone stay safe, be good to yourselves, spread some good vibes in this world because I just definitely need it right now. And with that, we're out.
Peace.